Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. I am so incredibly glad you're here today because we are unpacking something absolutely fascinating and honestly deeply human. We're going to be looking at the hidden psychological traits of people who have survived prolonged stress and profound hardship. We often think of trauma as leaving these really visible, obvious scars, but the truth is, sometimes suffering rewires the brain so subtly that you don't even notice the shift until years and years later. So today, we're going to explore exactly how the nervous system adapts to all of this and reveal the unspoken rules people carry with them long after the danger has actually passed. Right off the bat, I want you to listen to this quote. There's a kind of person who laughs the loudest in the room and goes home and cries in the shower. It really hits hard, doesn't it? It just perfectly captures the bittersweet duality of these individuals. These are the friends who will sit with you through a 3 a.m. breakdown, hold your hand through every single season of your grief, and then quietly fall apart completely alone because they genuinely do not know how to let someone do the exact same thing for them. And man, that just brilliantly illustrates the contrast between how these individuals appear to the outside world and the incredibly heavy, unseen history they carry just beneath the surface. On the outside, you see the good grades, the quick humor, the warmth, right? You see a charm that makes strangers feel immediately safe. But on the inside, there's this quiet exhaustion, there's crying alone, there's a nervous system that reflexively memorizes the exits of literally every room they walk into. And it's not out of paranoia. It's because at some point in their life, they desperately needed to know exactly where the door was. So, let's dive into part 1, the architecture of survival. Basically, how our brains adapt to prolonged stress. To really get why people behave this way after profound hardship, we have to understand post-traumatic adaptation. Because this isn't just about quirky personality traits, right? It's literal neurobiology. The brain, when it's subjected to prolonged stress, doesn't just casually bounce back. It literally restructures itself. So, the absolute crucial takeaway here is that these traits we're about to explore, they are not flaws, they are not weaknesses. They are actually incredibly efficient survival mechanisms built by a nervous system that was forced to adapt to a constant state of threat. It's the brain doing exactly what it's supposed to do to keep you safe. It just kind of forgets to turn the alarm off when the fire's finally out. Okay, moving on to our next piece, the hypervigilant social shield and how people navigate relationships after trauma. Trying to navigate relationships after trauma is honestly like playing chess on a board where the rules just keep changing, and the brain adapts to this in some truly astonishing ways. Think about it. We often call it intuition when our friends know we're upset before we even say a single word, right? But what looks like magical intuition is actually hypervigilance. It's a highly exhausted nervous system that was trained really early on to constantly read rooms for danger. They are relentlessly scanning for microexpressions, tone shifts, even silences. And while this makes them extraordinarily observant, deeply caring friends who truly notice you, it also leads to a permanent, bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of sleep is ever going to fix. Now, what's super interesting and honestly a little heartbreaking about this second trait is how quiet and subtle it is. This is the habit of apologizing literally just for existing. It's shrinking down in conversations, constantly second-guessing if they're actually hungry or tired, and pre-apologizing, sorry to bother you, becomes almost like a verbal tick. And the psychology behind this? It stems from early lessons, whether they were explicitly said or just implied, that their basic needs were an inconvenience to others. So they learn to apologize for their needs way before someone else can punish them for having them. And look, the science totally backs this up. Research out of the University of Waterloo found a massive correlation between chronic apologizers and significantly higher anxiety levels, plus way lower self-worth. And to put that into perspective, it's absolutely crucial to understand that they don't have lower self-worth because they're actually doing things wrong. They have it because they were systematically conditioned to feel wrong simply for being themselves. Connecting that right into our next point, this exact same hypervigilance creates the most intensely attentive friends you will ever meet. They remember that you hate coriander. They remember the name of that random coworker who annoyed you 2 years ago. They remember the quiet anniversary of your loss. They fiercely ensure that you are seen because they know in their own bodies exactly what it costs a person to go unnoticed. They essentially become the person they once desperately needed someone else to be for them. All right, let's shift gears a bit inward. Section 3, the illusion of independence and the internal battleground of self-reliance. We've talked a lot about how they interact with others, but how do these survivors manage themselves? Society absolutely loves to praise independence, but consider the reality of this third trait.
We often celebrate extreme compulsive self-reliance, like, someone researching a major surgery totally alone, or moving an entire apartment solo without asking for a single favor. But this reveals a totally different reality. This isn't just strength. It's very often a defense mechanism born from being profoundly let down in the past. Their nervous system quietly made a new rule. Don't need people, need yourself. It is quite literally old pain wearing a productivity badge.
Which brings us to a really fascinating concept for our fourth trait. Clinical attachment researchers use this term earned secure attachment, and it perfectly explains how a survivor of relational trauma can carve out this massive space for you in their life, fight for you tooth and nail, and love you so fiercely, while always keeping one final emotional door firmly, securely shut. They manage to maintain a protective emotional distance right alongside that profound love.
The crucial takeaway here, you kind of have to embrace the dissonance. Both things are true at once. The love they have for you is absolutely 100% real, but that protective wall, yeah, that's real too. They might trust you completely, but handing over that final innermost layer of vulnerability doesn't actually feel like intimacy to them. It feels like handing over a loaded weapon. And wow, does that tie into this next trait. When someone lives in chaos, their nervous system literally recalibrates its threshold for stress. Clinically, this is called pain tolerance habituation. They can handle devastating news or intense physical pain with a level of composure that frankly unsettles other people who haven't had to build that muscle. They can solve the immediate crisis perfectly. But the massive danger here is that this slow erosion of their own distress signals means they might not even realize they're hurting until the adrenaline totally fades weeks later and they just completely fall apart alone.
Which flows perfectly into this clinical concept, hyperactivation of the doing mode. This explains exactly why these folks struggle so incredibly hard with rest. Have you ever noticed someone who secretly finds going on a relaxing vacation super stressful? Or someone who feels like sitting perfectly still is literally a trap? It's because their brain interprets stillness as a threat. In unpredictable environments, calm was never, ever truly safe. It was just the eerie silence right before something terrible happened.
So, where do we go from here? Let's jump into our final section, alchemy and post-traumatic growth, how we turn all this wreckage into actual wisdom. Ultimately, how does someone process all that pain, that relentless hypervigilance, and that exhaustion? Well, often, their native language becomes dark humor. But there's a really stark difference between just deflecting to avoid pain altogether and actual alchemy. These individuals will make a dry, self-deprecating joke about their trauma that makes you laugh, even if you feel a tiny bit guilty for laughing. This isn't just a coping mechanism, guys. It's an act of power. It's a way of looking right at their past and saying, I refuse to let the trauma have the final word. They take something wildly destructive and use it to actually make the room lighter. And again, the science on this is just amazing. A 2021 study from the journal Humor found that people who process severe adversity through a dark comedic lens actually report significantly higher emotional resilience and way higher overall life satisfaction compared to folks who process it purely somberly. The punchline, surprisingly enough, is very often a crucial part of the healing process. And that brings us to our final trait, which, honestly, I think is absolutely the most important one on our list. They are still becoming. People who have suffered too much are not finished. They are not broken artifacts forever defined by their absolute worst experiences. Instead, they are often quietly, without any applause or fanfare at all, actively doing the hard work to ensure they're no longer controlled by what happened to them. So what does that active work actually look like day to day? It's waking up every single morning and making really hard choices. It's engaging deeply in therapy, journaling to untangle all those messy thoughts, setting firm boundaries they used to be entirely incapable of setting, and intentionally choosing relationships completely differently this time around. It is just an incredibly courageous, ongoing effort to rebuild their lives, literal brick by brick. And please know, this isn't just some fluffy, hopeful, feel-good idea. Post-traumatic growth is a deeply studied, verified scientific phenomenon. Surviving adversity and actively choosing to do the work leads to a profound expansion of character. It cultivates this depth of compassion and a sharp clarity about what actually matters in life that many people spend decades searching for. It creates a kind of wisdom that simply cannot be taught in a classroom. It literally has to be lived.
I just want to pause here for a second. If you saw yourself in this explainer today, I really want you to know something. You deserve to feel validated. You deserve to be understood. I want you to just sit with the simple, quiet acknowledgement that you have been through something immensely difficult, you are still here, and that is no small thing. You should be incredibly proud of your survival.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Which one of these 9 traits hits closest to home for you? Or maybe finally gives a name to a behavior you've carried for years. Think about it. And please, as you go about the rest of your day, try a little experiment for me. Let someone else take care of you today. Just once. Just to see what happens. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep growing, and I'll catch you next time.